Summer in the French countryside was frequently characterized by tranquility and the intoxicating aroma of sunlight. In the beginning of June, Elise, a 24-year-old woman, had relocated to a modest residence situated adjacent to a vineyard. She resided independently, worked remotely for a fashion company, and devoted the majority of her afternoons to reading on the veranda or strolling along lavender-lined paths. Mark, a man in his 50s, was her neighbor. He was silent but refined, with silver-streaked hair, and he was tall. Since his wife's passing 3 years ago, he has resided alone in a residence with a wooden veranda that is adorned with vines. Mark frequently pruned his plants in the morning, and Elise was unable to ignore the fortitude of his tanned hands as he handled the pruning shears. Initially, the exchange consisted of courteous remarks over the fence, followed by protracted glances that exceeded the appropriate duration. Mark knocked on Elise's door one late evening to retrieve the umbrella she had forsaken on the veranda due to an approaching storm. Elise, whose hair was still damp from the shower and she was enveloped in a thin robe, was taken aback by the intensity of her neighbor's gaze. The lightning did not appear entirely from the heavens. Mark stood at the doorway, trailing precipitation down the sleeves of his rolled-up shirt as he held the dripping umbrella. Elise gently pulled her robe tighter, offering a soft smile. However, she was aware that this only caused the neckline to slide lower, revealing a glistening stretch of skin at her collarbone. She expressed her gratitude with a voice that was scarcely audible. "Thank you." The precipitation arrived with such abruptness. Mark's eyes were fixed on her for an extended period of time, as if they were filled with unspoken thoughts. His voice was gruff and he replied, "Call me Mark." Neither of them could determine whether the cold or something more profound was the cause. Elise retreated, thereby expanding the door. "Then, Mark, please enter, if you do not object." Suddenly, the tiny house appeared to be excessively quiet. Mark, half-soaked, stood in the living room, his eyes drifting to Elise's bare shoulder, then trailing down to the pale skin barely concealed beneath silk. The gentle glow of warm light illuminated the room, and the sound of rain on the tiled roof provided a soft melody in the background. "Aren't you cold?" he inquired, uncertain as to whether he desired her response. Elise approached him, her fingertips brushing his sleeve, and she commented, "Just a little damp. However, you are completely saturated. Perhaps you ought to modify your behavior." Mark nodded slowly, as if he were being drawn into the unspoken rhythm between them. Elise escorted him to the guest bedroom, where she deposited a substantial towel and a few of her unpacked garments. She turned around by coincidence as he removed his shirt, and their eyes met. A single second. 2 seconds. Elise's cheeks were slightly flushed as she tenderly stated, "You are still quite handsome." Mark approached her without uttering a word. His breath was both warm and heavy, as if he were engaged in a battle between reason and a flame that had been latent for an extended period. He reiterated, his voice now more resonant, "You should refer to me as Mark." Elise's lips were pressed into a secretive smile as she gazed up at him. "Well, Mark," she murmured, placing her hand on his chest. The skin was scorching heated when she touched it. "Are you currently experiencing a chill?" Mark declined to respond. Her waist was tenderly grasped by his hand, which then slid to her bare shoulder. The robe was removed with the same ease as the glimpses Elise had been offering him for days. The years that separated them vanished beneath the gentle glow of lamplight and the hushed sound of rain in the night. The final silk fell onto the wooden floor, leaving only mingled breaths, hesitant yet ravenous touches, and faint, broken gasps. Elise had never dared to conceive that a man of his age could make her feel so utterly desired, not only as a young, beautiful girl, but as a woman in her fullness, cherished and viewed as a living, breathing masterpiece, ripe, magnetic, and unforgettable. Elise laid on her back on the plush, white bed, her damp hair fanning out in gentle waves reminiscent of chestnut silk. Her body trembled, not from cold, but from an anticipation so intense that it left her extremities tingling. Her robe had long since vanished, left at the foot of the bed. Mark's focus was no longer clouded with hesitation. as it had been in the doorway as he leaned over her. It was now brimming with hunger, admittedly, but a sense of reverence resonated beneath it. He gently kissed her forehead before gradually tracing a path down her warm cheek, along her jawline, to her neck, and finally to the subtle ridge of her collarbone, the location that always made Elise feel the most feminine. She experienced a sensation of dissolving with each contact of his lips on her skin. She was unable to recall the last time that a mere kiss on the shoulder caused her to tremble. Her lips slightly parted, her eyes closed, and she let out a quiet exhalation as if she were anticipating something more profound, something that was burning. Mark's fingers extended from her shoulder down her arm where a delicate bracelet delicately swayed. His other hand glided over the exposed skin of her hip, enticing her to approach him until their bodies were in close proximity. Elise could sense the hardness of him, hot and insistent, as it pressed against the sensitive inner surface of her thigh. Her spine was jolted by a hot sensation. "I made an effort to minimize my proximity," Mark murmured, his voice rough with desire and tinged with the scent of red wine and something entirely, maturely male. "However, you render that impossible." Elise declined to respond. Her eyes were fixed on his, a mixture of bewilderment and curiosity. She drew him down by encircling her arms around his neck. Subsequently, refrained from withholding any longer. Mark responded with a passionate, heartfelt kiss, his lips engulfing hers as if he were apprehensive about losing her if he were to release her. He increased the boldness of his hands, which he used to navigate every contour of her body with a practiced reverence. His movements were deliberate and sensual, rather than hurried. Elise could sense that he was acutely aware of the proper way to read a woman's body, when to grip her midsection more tightly and when to allow his hand to glide across the fullness of her breast, which was hot and awaiting his attention. A searing trail was left in their wake as his lips traveled lower, down her chest. She arched towards him, a gentle gasp escaping her lips, and his tongue followed, slow and deliberate. She was helpless. No one had ever worshipped her body with such patient maturity, not desperate, not hurried, but with every movement imbued with the weight of something sacrosanct. Mark kissed her abdomen and then her inner thigh, causing her to tremble. He paused, his gaze alighting on hers as if he were seeking permission in the manner of a genuine gentleman. Elise then nodded. The subsequent events were reminiscent of a disarray. The fire between them did not ignite. Rather, it smolderingly encircled them like silk filaments of flame. Breathless moans, the gentle creak of the bed, and murmurs murmured into the darkness. All of this was transformed into a private symphony that was only audible to them. Mark lay on his side with one arm draped around Elise, his fingers gently stroking her damp hair, as everything quieted. She curled her lips in quiet gratification as she nestled against his chest. She softly whispered, "You not only made me feel like a young girl, but like a woman who is truly desired." Mark maintained his grip on her, his lips pressing against the summit of her head. "Because you are," he said gently. "Your entire body." Golden streaks were painted across the wrinkled white linens as the morning light spilt through the large window. Elise briefly opened her eyes with a confused expression, as if she was uncertain of her location, as her lashes fluttered, and she stirred slightly. But then she felt the warm skin beside her, the strong arms still draped around her waist, and the memories of the night before came flooding back, visceral and overwhelming. Mark was still in slumber. His salt and pepper hair was slightly tousled, and his breathing was tranquil as it delicately caressed the back of her neck. Elise maintained her composure, gazing at his face as the gentle dawn radiance intensified the contours of his composed, unwavering features. She gently extended her fingertips, tracing his chest, and felt the steady, slow rhythm of his heartbeat. She exhaled a deep, conflicted breath. She had engaged in sexual intercourse with her neighbor, a 50-year-old man who had previously only been a confidant during a few shared conversations, an individual who had gazed at her with kind eyes, and who had now, after a single night, touched the most intimate parts of her body and spirit. Mark began to stir and open his eyes. His voice was hoarse from slumber, but it was warm as he murmured, "Good morning." Elise's smile was still tinged with the afterglow of the night. "I never anticipated waking up to this kind of morning." "Neither did I." He raised an eyebrow and tenderly drew her in, applying a gentle kiss to her forehead. "However, I have no remorse." Then she spoke slowly after gazing at him for a moment. "Mark, last night. It did not make me feel like a girl who was playing with desire. It evoked a sense of femininity in me. Sincerely." Mark's cheek was still reddened from the previous night. "Because that is who you are. A mature, attractive woman who has been lacking genuine tenderness." Elise delicately bit her lip. She sat up, the blanket falling from her shoulders, revealing her smooth, bare skin, which was dotted with faint kiss marks, a calm testament to the blazing night. She selected his white shirt, which was oversized but long enough to reach her thighs, and donned it, tying a few buttons. Mark was unable to turn his gaze away from the sight of her in his shirt, her hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders, and her bare legs stepping into the early morning light. Her voice was subdued as she stated, "I am going to prepare some coffee and contemplate how I am supposed to address this emotion." The sheet fell to Mark's midsection as he propped himself up, revealing the toned torso of a man in his 50s. He called out gently, "Elise, last night was not merely a fling. Not for me. You may not be aware of this, but I have desired to hold you in that position for an extended period of time." Elise was paralyzed by the kitchen counter. She placed the mug into the machine with a minor tremor in her hands. Afterward, she reversed direction. "Then, what if I express to you that I desire to be held in that manner once more?" "Not only once." Mark approached her and gingerly clung to her, his hand enclosing her waist through the delicate fabric of his shirt. "Subsequently, permit me." "Elise, there is no need to hasten the process of defining this. We must simply be truthful with ourselves." They kissed once more, this time with a gentler pace, this time with a sense of comprehension rather than urgency. However, this did not imply that there was any less enthusiasm. Not in a fiery blaze, but in a slow, simmering burn, rich and enduring, they once again lost themselves in each other as the sunlight rose higher. From that morning on, the small, quiet home in the suburbs was not only scented with coffee, but also with the scent of skin, intimacy, and something secret that was quietly blooming behind closed doors. Elise was seated on Mark's lap, her arms draped over his shoulders, and her bare legs curled around his waist as their kiss deepened slow, tender, yet burning with intensity. The small kitchen was illuminated by golden sunlight and the aroma of coffee. The soft tangles of her long hair, which were still tousled from the residual passion of the night before, cascaded down. Mark's voice was husky as he whispered into her ear, "You'd better be careful if you continue to sit on me like this. I'm never letting you go." Elise leaned down to kiss his neck, releasing a gentle chuckle. "I am not interested in traveling." But at that moment, the kitchen window resonated with a gentle thud. Elise's head whipped around in surprise. A shadow had just started past. They both experienced a brief period of inaction. Elise swiftly slipped off Mark's lap, squeezing his shirt closer around her. Her cheeks were now flushed with more than just desire. Mark approached the rear door and opened it, only to capture a glimpse of a small, swift figure retreating down the side path. The figure was unmistakably familiar. Martha. 2 houses away, there was an elderly neighbor. He is nearly 70 years old, and his curiosity is renowned. He remains sharp-eyed. Mark knew that she had seen them from the expression of surprised recognition he had captured just before she disappeared behind the fence. He returned indoors. Elise stood in the kitchen, holding her coffee cup with both hands as if she were seeking warmth to stabilize herself. One shoulder of his shirt had fallen, revealing pale skin and the faintest hint of a love mark near her clavicle. The shirt continued to hang loosely on her. Her irises trembled with anxiety. "Elise." Mark initiated the action, however, she intervened by raising her hand. "She observed, didn't she?" Her eyes were fixed on the open door, and her voice was subdued. "I believe that could be a component of it." Elise exhaled with tremors. Mark, if this information is disclosed, I am uncertain as to how I will address the situation. I am not like you. I am still youthful and continue to live under the burden of judgment. Mark advanced and embraced her shoulders. You are not required to provide an explanation. I comprehend. Additionally, I will ensure that you are not harmed by anyone. However, they were both aware that at times, the pain did not originate from others directly, but rather from the sideways glances, the loaded silences, and the knowing gestures Elise would encounter each time she stepped outside her door. A few days afterward, Elise did not return to Mark's residence. She maintained her distance, endeavoring to resume her life as if nothing had transpired. However, all of this had been altered. Mrs. Martha's gaze was fixed on her for an excessive amount of time at the grocery store. Two elderly women conversed in the cafe's corner, while whispering into their teacups. Elise was aware of its concealed glances and the subdued giggles that emanated from behind her. And the shame of having been captured in her most vulnerable, intimate moment was even more distressing. One late evening, as she stood in front of her mirror, wiping off her makeup and observing herself hair limp, eyes tired, lips that had whispered Mark's name under dim light, she was unable to suppress the emotions any longer. Next, she received a rap on her door. At least once. Twice. 3 times steady and patient. Mark was present when Elise opened it. He is depicted in a long cloak and is holding a bouquet of soft lavender in his hand, as if he were aware of her current needs, which were for something delicate. Something that is genuine. Elise, he said, his voice warm, I cannot pretend that nothing happened. I am unable to abandon you in the midst of this minor tempest. She gazed at him for an extended period of time. She then stepped aside, allowing the door to open broader as if she were expanding her heart once more. Like what you heard. There's plenty more heartbreak and secrets to come. Hit like, subscribe, and stay curious with Tangled Truths.